There is a quiet moment that happens when someone encounters a presence they cannot easily define. Their usual rhythm shifts, their tone changes, their certainty softens or sharpens. This moment is not accidental. It occurs when your uniqueness steps into the room and disrupts what felt familiar to them. You are not trying to change him. You are not performing or proving anything. You are simply being what you are, and that is precisely what alters his behavior. Uniqueness does not announce itself loudly. It works silently, touching places in the psyche that were never meant to be comfortable. And when that happens, behavior always follows. Your uniqueness does not announce itself with noise or demand recognition through effort. It works in silence, entering the unconscious space long before words or logic have time to intervene. When he encounters you, something beneath his awareness begins to stir. This is why his behavior changes in ways even he cannot fully explain. The unconscious mind is not concerned with politeness or social rules. It responds to symbols, contrasts, and unresolved inner material. And your uniqueness becomes precisely that, a living symbol that disturbs what was previously dormant. From childhood onward, people build internal maps of the world and of others. These maps help them predict behavior and maintain emotional safety. Most encounters reinforce these patterns. People resemble what is already known. They behave in familiar ways, speak predictable emotional languages, and fit neatly into categories the mind can manage. But when you do not align with those expectations, the unconscious reacts immediately. You disrupt the map. You represent something unassimilated, and the psyche cannot ignore what it does not understand. This activation often shows itself subtly at first. He may feel unusually alert around you, more self-aware or oddly unsettled without knowing why. Neuroscience supports this experience. Studies on novelty and psychological salience show that unfamiliar traits increase attention and emotional arousal. The brain prioritizes what feels different because difference signals potential meaning. You are not simply another person to his mind. You are a question, and questions pull energy. Your uniqueness also awakens what he has not yet lived. The unconscious carries unrealized possibilities, suppressed desires, and abandoned parts of the self. When you embody qualities he has denied in himself, emotional depth, independence, creativity, stillness, or integrity, those qualities are mirrored back to him. He may admire you intensely or feel inexplicably threatened. Often, it is both. This inner conflict does not remain contained. It leaks into behavior. He may become more attentive, more guarded, or strangely inconsistent because the encounter is stirring material he has never resolved. Think of a man who has learned to survive by emotional restraint, meeting someone who expresses feeling without shame. Her openness does not criticize him, yet it exposes the cost of his silence. The unconscious experiences this not as an idea, but as a confrontation. Something within him recognizes what was lost. He might lean closer, seeking that missing part through her presence, or pull away to protect the structure he has built. Either response is not about her actions, but about the inner awakening she triggers. Your uniqueness also bypasses his conscious defenses. The ego prefers control, explanation, and predictability. But the unconscious does not negotiate, it reacts. This is why he may struggle to articulate what he feels around you. He might say you are different, without being able to explain how. Language fails because the experience is symbolic rather than rational. You are felt more than understood. This activation can also create projection. When someone cannot integrate what you represent, they may attribute exaggerated meaning to you. You become idealized as everything they lack or criticized as everything they fear. Neither is truly about you. It is about the psyche attempting to make sense of what has been stirred. Real-life relationships often show this pattern. A person enters someone's life and suddenly becomes the center of emotional intensity, despite doing nothing extraordinary. The intensity does not come from behavior, it comes from unconscious activation. Importantly, this process is not something you control, and it is not something you should manage. Many people, sensing the discomfort they cause, try to shrink themselves to restore balance. But the imbalance is not a flaw, it is a signal. Psychological growth often begins with inner disturbance. Research on personal transformation consistently shows that meaningful change is preceded by periods of confusion, tension, or emotional unease. Your uniqueness becomes the catalyst, not by instruction, but by presence. This is why his behavior may oscillate. One moment he is drawn toward you, seeking clarity or connection. The next, he distances himself, needing to regain inner equilibrium. The unconscious works slowly, and integration takes time. Some people choose growth, others choose avoidance. But either way, the encounter leaves a mark. Your role is not to explain yourself or make yourself digestible. The unconscious cannot be persuaded, it must experience. When you remain authentic, grounded, and self-contained, you allow the activation to unfold naturally. You do not rescue him from discomfort, nor do you weaponize your difference. You simply remain real. And this is the deeper truth. Your uniqueness activates his unconscious because it carries truth. Not the kind that argues, but the kind that reveals. Truth unsettles before it liberates. It challenges illusions before it offers meaning. If his behavior changes, it is because something essential has been touched. Not everyone is ready to face what awakens within them, but the awakening itself is undeniable. So do not measure your impact by his clarity or consistency. Measure it by the fact that something moved. In a world built on repetition and imitation, your uniqueness does not just stand out, it penetrates. And once the unconscious is activated, nothing remains exactly the same. When he is around you, something subtle yet profound begins to happen. The version of himself he usually inhabits no longer feels fully intact. His gestures, opinions, and emotional habits start to feel less certain, as if the ground beneath his identity has shifted slightly. This is not because you challenge him directly or demand explanation. It happens because your presence invites a question his identity has long avoided, and once that question appears, it cannot be unseen. Identity is not as solid as people believe. It is a structure built over time from expectations, roles, and repeated stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Most people move through life protected by these stories. They know how to behave, what to value, and how to respond because their identity provides a script. But when he encounters someone who does not need to perform an identity to exist, his script begins to feel fragile. Around you, he senses that being is more important than proving, and that realization quietly unsettles him. You may notice that he becomes more reflective in your presence. He pauses before speaking. He asks questions he never asked before, or he becomes defensive over things he once took for granted. This is the mind attempting to stabilize itself while something deeper is being questioned. Psychological studies on self-concept show that when individuals are exposed to alternative ways of being, especially those embodied with confidence, their sense of self enters a state of reassessment. Your way of moving through the world becomes a living alternative to the identity he has been rehearsing. Consider how this plays out in everyday life. A man who has defined himself by productivity and control meets someone who values depth, presence, and emotional honesty. He may initially admire these qualities, but admiration soon turns inward. He begins to ask himself whether his achievements have replaced something essential around you. His accomplishments feel less anchoring, his certainty less convincing. He may try to impress you more, or conversely, withdraw because the familiar markers of worth no longer function the same way. This questioning often creates tension because identity is tied to safety. To question who you are is to risk losing the ground that has supported you. That is why his behavior might fluctuate. One moment he leans into authenticity, speaking more honestly than he ever has. The next, he reverts to old patterns, using humor, distance, or control to restore balance. These shifts are not manipulation. They are signs of an identity in transition, struggling to reconcile what has been with what might be. Your presence also highlights the difference between the self he presents to the world and the self he experiences internally. Many people maintain identities that function well socially, but feel empty privately. When you show up without pretending, without masking your contradictions, he becomes aware of his own fragmentation. Research on authenticity consistently shows that people feel discomfort when confronted with genuine self-expression, because it exposes their own inauthenticity. That discomfort often manifests as restlessness, self-doubt, or sudden changes in behavior. At times, he may project this discomfort onto you. He might say you make him feel uncertain or unsettled, without understanding that the feeling originates within himself. You are not creating the doubt, you are revealing it. Your existence poses a quiet question: who are you when no one is watching? And for someone who has never asked that, the question can feel overwhelming. Yet this questioning is not destructive. It is the beginning of depth. Identity that has never been examined remains shallow, easily shaken by external validation or loss. When he begins to question himself around you, he is standing at the edge of growth. Whether he steps forward or retreats depends on his readiness, not your worth. There is a reason people remember the ones who made them question their identity long after they are gone. Such encounters mark a turning point. They become reference points in the psyche, moments when life offered a choice between remaining familiar and becoming more real. You are not responsible for the choice he makes. Your role is simply to remain aligned with who you are. Do not shrink to preserve his comfort. Do not explain yourself to stabilize his identity. The questioning you evoke is not a flaw to correct, but a doorway. Some will walk through it and thank you silently. Others will turn away and blame the door. But the question remains, echoing quietly within them. If he behaves differently around you, if he seems uncertain, drawn, or conflicted, understand this. He is encountering himself in a new way. And that encounter, however uncomfortable, is one of the most meaningful experiences a human being can have. When you move through the world as you truly are, something unspoken begins to shift in the space around you. You may not notice it immediately, but others do, especially those who are accustomed to subtle hierarchies, unspoken rules, and emotional negotiations. Authenticity does not shout, yet it carries a quiet authority. It does not seek dominance, yet it alters the balance of power simply by refusing to participate in illusions. This is why your authenticity disrupts power dynamics, not through force but through presence. Most power structures are maintained by predictability. People learn what is expected of them and, in return, learn what they can expect from others. Roles are assigned silently. Someone leads, someone follows, someone controls, someone adapts. These patterns persist because they are rarely questioned. But when you enter without performing a role, the structure trembles. You do not respond according to the script. You do not trade truth for approval. And this creates uncertainty in those who rely on control to feel secure. Your authenticity removes leverage. Emotional leverage depends on fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood. When you are honest about who you are, what you feel, and what you will not tolerate, you make manipulation ineffective. This does not mean you are confrontational. Often it is the opposite. You are calm, grounded, and clear. That calm becomes unsettling to those who are used to controlling outcomes through pressure or ambiguity. In everyday life, this can be seen in simple interactions. A person who speaks directly without aggression in a workplace where politics dominate changes the atmosphere instantly. Colleagues begin to measure their words more carefully. Some feel exposed, others relieved. Studies on emotional regulation show that individuals who maintain inner coherence influence group behavior more than those who assert authority loudly. Your authenticity becomes a stabilizing force, and stability itself is power. This shift is particularly noticeable in relationships. When you do not chase, plead, or over-explain, the usual dynamics of pursuit and withdrawal lose their grip. Someone who once held emotional advantage may feel it slipping away, not because you took it, but because you no longer need it. You are not trying to win or resist. You are simply present. And presence cannot be dominated in the way insecurity can. Your refusal to abandon yourself also exposes the fragility of false power. Many people build influence through image control or emotional withholding. These strategies work only as long as others participate unconsciously. When you remain authentic, you opt out of the game. You do not reward inconsistency with attention. You do not negotiate your values for closeness. This forces the other person to confront the emptiness of their tactics. Some respond with respect, others respond with resistance. Both reactions confirm the same truth. The dynamic has changed. There is also an internal shift that occurs within you. Authenticity aligns your inner world with your outer behavior. This alignment generates confidence that does not depend on outcomes. Research in psychology consistently shows that people who act in accordance with their values experience greater emotional resilience. That resilience is felt by others. They sense that you are not easily shaken, and this alters how they engage with you. Power no longer flows toward the loudest or most controlling, but toward the most grounded. This can be intimidating to those who equate power with dominance. They may attempt to test you, provoke reactions, or reassert old roles. Yet each time you respond without abandoning yourself, the dynamic weakens further. You are not fighting for control, you are embodying freedom. And freedom destabilizes systems built on fear. Importantly, this disruption is not about superiority. Authenticity does not place you above others, it places you within yourself. The disruption occurs because many systems depend on people being disconnected from their own truth. When you reconnect, you become unpredictable in the most powerful way. You cannot be easily managed because you are not hiding. Over time, this creates a ripple effect. Others begin to show up more honestly, or they distance themselves if honesty feels too threatening. Either outcome is a form of clarity. You no longer carry the burden of maintaining roles that suffocate you. The space around you becomes more real, more demanding, but also more alive. If you ever notice that your authenticity makes others uncomfortable, resist the urge to soften it for their sake. Discomfort is often the first sign that an outdated dynamic is dissolving. What replaces it may be unfamiliar, but it is closer to truth, and truth, once embodied, has a way of rearranging power without ever asking permission. When he is near you, he senses something that cannot be explained with simple words. It is not just attraction, and it is not merely curiosity. It is the quiet awareness that remaining the same may no longer be possible. This awareness carries weight. It presses gently but persistently against the structures he has built to feel safe in the world. He may not consciously think of it as transformation, yet his body, his emotions, and his instincts recognize the risk. To know you is to stand at the edge of change, and not everyone is prepared to step forward. Transformation is rarely welcomed at first. The mind prefers continuity because continuity feels like survival. People learn how to function within their limitations and begin to mistake familiarity for truth. When your presence enters his life, it introduces a different rhythm. You move, think, or feel in ways that suggest another way of being is possible. That suggestion alone is enough to unsettle the inner order he depends on. Around you, the habits that once defined him start to feel optional rather than necessary, and that realization is both liberating and frightening. This is why his behavior may become conflicted. One moment he is drawn toward you, curious, open, and engaged. The next he retreats, becomes distant, or distracts himself with old routines. This is not inconsistency without meaning. It is the psyche negotiating with the possibility of growth. Psychological research on change shows that when individuals perceive a threat to their established identity, the nervous system often responds with avoidance before integration can occur. You are not causing fear, you are revealing it. Your presence highlights the gap between who he is and who he could become. That gap has always existed, but it remained abstract until you arrived. Now it has a face, a voice, a living example. You embody qualities he has postponed or abandoned: emotional honesty, courage, depth, or stillness. In your company, the excuses that once justified stagnation begin to lose their strength. He may feel exposed, not because you judge him, but because you reflect possibility. Consider how people react when they encounter someone who lives with intention. They may admire that person deeply while simultaneously feeling restless or defensive. Studies on upward social comparison show that exposure to someone perceived as more aligned with their values can motivate growth or trigger withdrawal. The deciding factor is readiness. Your presence becomes a silent test, not of worth, but of willingness. He may sense that allowing himself to move closer to you would require letting go of parts of himself that no longer serve him. Old identities, coping mechanisms, and emotional defenses cannot survive transformation. They resist quietly, urging him to stay the same. This internal struggle often expresses itself through behavior, hesitation, mixed signals, or sudden emotional distance. From the outside, it may look like confusion. From the inside, it feels like standing between two lives. What makes this especially intense is that transformation cannot be controlled. It does not happen on a schedule, and it does not respect comfort. Once initiated, it asks for honesty, and honesty demands sacrifice. He may sense that knowing you would require him to confront his own patterns, how he avoids intimacy, how he hides behind roles, how he settles for less than what he desires. That confrontation is the risk he feels. Your role in this process is not to convince or reassure him. Transformation cannot be negotiated into existence. It unfolds when the individual chooses to face what has been avoided. When you remain grounded and true to yourself, you allow the process to remain clear. You do not chase him through his fear, nor do you punish him for it. You simply remain present, which is often the most challenging invitation of all. Some people respond to this risk by stepping forward. They choose growth, even though it requires discomfort. Others turn away, not because the possibility is wrong, but because the timing is not right. Both outcomes are part of the same truth. Transformation respects freedom. It cannot be forced, only recognized. If he pulls back, do not assume you were too much. Often you were too real. You represented a future he could sense but not yet inhabit. That awareness leaves a mark, even if he walks away. Transformation does not always happen immediately, but once glimpsed, it rarely disappears. Your presence becomes a threshold. To cross it is to change. To avoid it is to remain familiar. Either choice carries consequences. But know this, when someone senses the risk of transformation around you, it is because you carry something rare, the ability to awaken what lies dormant, and that awakening, whether embraced or resisted, is never without meaning. Ultimately, your uniqueness changes behavior because it raises the standard by which everything else is measured, not through demands, ultimatums, or superiority, but through quiet contrast. When you enter someone's life fully aligned with who you are, you introduce a reference point that did not exist before. From that moment on, nothing is experienced in isolation. Conversations, choices, and behaviors are unconsciously compared to what your presence revealed. This is how standards are raised, not by instruction, but by example. Most people live according to standards they inherited rather than chose. They adapt to what is common, acceptable, or tolerated. Over time, this becomes normal, even if it feels empty. When you show up with clarity, self-respect, and emotional depth, you interrupt that normalization. You demonstrate what it looks like to live without betraying oneself. And once someone witnesses that, their tolerance for mediocrity, both in themselves and others, begins to erode. He may not articulate the shift, but he feels it. Around you, his usual behaviors feel insufficient. The effort he once considered enough suddenly feels minimal, not because you criticize him, but because your way of being reveals what genuine engagement looks like. Research on behavioral adaptation shows that people naturally adjust their actions when exposed to higher standards in close proximity. This adjustment is often unconscious. He may start listening more carefully, choosing his words more intentionally, or reflecting on his patterns, simply because the old way no longer fits the environment you create. Your uniqueness also raises emotional standards. When you communicate honestly, respect boundaries, and remain consistent, you make emotional inconsistency visible. Someone who once relied on ambiguity or emotional withdrawal may feel compelled to show up more clearly or feel uncomfortable enough to pull away. Either reaction is evidence of the same phenomenon. The bar has been raised. Emotional games lose their power when they are no longer met with confusion or self-doubt. This can be seen clearly in relationships where one person stops over-explaining, stops chasing validation, and stops accepting half-presence. The dynamic shifts immediately. The other person either rises to meet the new standard or resists it. Studies on attachment and relational health consistently show that secure behavior encourages growth in others, while also exposing avoidance. Your uniqueness does not force change, but it makes stagnation obvious. Importantly, this raised standard is not rigid or demanding. It is rooted in self-alignment. You are not asking for more, you are being more. And that distinction matters. People can ignore requests, but they cannot easily ignore lived reality. Your calm self-respect, your depth, your willingness to walk away from what diminishes you all communicate a powerful message without words. This is how I live. And that message lingers. He may begin to question his own values in light of this. What he once justified, lack of effort, emotional unavailability, avoidance, now feels exposed. This questioning can be uncomfortable, even painful, but it is also the beginning of integrity. Integrity is born when a person can no longer pretend that less is enough. Your uniqueness brings integrity into the room simply by existing. This is why behavior changes even after you are no longer present. People often report that certain encounters altered how they approached future relationships or decisions. They became less willing to settle, more aware of their patterns, more honest about what they wanted. These shifts rarely happen because someone was taught a lesson. They happen because someone embodied a higher standard long enough for it to be felt. You may not always see the impact immediately. Sometimes the change shows up as distance rather than growth. Someone may leave because they are not ready to meet the standard your presence evokes. That does not diminish its value. In fact, it confirms it. Standards reveal readiness. They do not create it. What matters is that you do not lower yourself to maintain connection. The temptation to soften your truth for acceptance is strong. especially when you sense discomfort in others. But lowering the standard only preserves patterns that ultimately suffocate both people. When you remain aligned, you allow others to make an honest choice, rise, resist, or walk away. And here is the deeper truth. The standard you raise for others begins with the one you hold for yourself. The way you treat your time, your emotions, your boundaries, and your inner life sets the tone for how others engage with you. When that tone is clear, consistent, and rooted in self-respect, it reshapes the emotional landscape around you. Your uniqueness does not demand change. It invites it. It says without words that depth is possible, honesty is survivable, and authenticity is worth the cost. Some will accept the invitation, others will not. But once the standard is raised, it cannot be unseen. And in a world accustomed to compromise, simply living by what feels true becomes a revolutionary act. If his behavior changes around you, do not rush to explain or soften yourself. This shift is not a problem to solve. It is evidence of impact. Your uniqueness is not meant to be convenient. It is meant to be true. And truth, when encountered, always moves something inside another human being, whether they are ready for it or not.